All right. Now, looking into what you do within the area of child protection and family interaction, how did this project started with you? Is it something that you have always wanted to do, or is it something you stumbled on growing? Life is very interesting in that sometimes we don't really know what is our trajectory, but we just keep moving. Sometimes some people know
That's
from the
right.
beginning, sometimes some people don't know. How did you get started in this line that you are
Yes.
working on? Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
That's an interesting question, and it's right. You're right that that it kind of it found me rather than me finding it. So I started my PhD in 2011, but I couldn't find a topic. I couldn't settle on a topic. I thought I would have one, but then sometimes I had too many questions. Sometimes I had not enough questions about that topic, and I could never really get my teeth into anything. Nothing that I really wanted to write about for 4 years. And then in 2014, my supervisor was involved in a very big funded project to evaluate a child sexual abuse prevention program in schools. So it was a big randomized control trial that was being conducted in Gold Coast schools here where I live, where we were seeing whether or not a child sexual abuse prevention program given to kids in years 1 and 2 was effective in helping them learn about sexual abuse. So that was the project that I was going to be working on. And initially I thought, oh, it's not really what I wanted to do, not really what I had in mind, but I said, yes, I would work on it, especially because it was funded. So I was able to get a scholarship on that. So that was tempting. And then I started reading about the topic because I actually didn't know anything about sexual abuse prevention programs. And I started reading. And as I was reading the research and becoming familiar with the area, I started to think, well, the research led me to a place where I felt that possibly using child-targeted education in this way wasn't the best way forward, wasn't the best use of resources, and that there were better ways of doing this, better ways of trying to solve this problem other than teaching children how to protect themselves. So that's how I came to my particular project now, because when I decided this and started writing about this, I then moved away from the evaluation program and went on this whole journey, which has ended where I am now in developing this current program that I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, parted ways with the evaluation and developed my own project from there.
So you said teaching children about prevention. Can you speak more about that? How do you even go
Mm.
about that?
Well, so it's an interesting history that child education has in this to prevent child abuse. So child sexual abuse came to recognition in the 70s. And at the time, there were some high profile cases and there was quite a panic, quite a public outcry. People were demanding that something be done about this problem. However, there was no evidence or theory to go on. No one really knew what to do. No one knew what to do. No one knew what the best way forward was. There was no theories to use and there was no evidence. We didn't know who it happened to, in what circumstances, in what situation, what people were doing. We just didn't know enough about it. And so it was thought that it would be good to take the ideas of the women's anti-rape movement at the time. So women at the time were being taught self-defense techniques. So rather than working against rape happening, the idea was that we were teaching women how to physically defend themselves against rapists, to stop rape happening through physical force. And so it was thought that that one might be a good thing to do with kids as well. So if we teach kids self-defense strategies, then they'll be able to ward off their attackers. They'll be able to ward off any sexual advances, sexual victimization. So that's the history of the programs. And now we have a wide array of programs, and they're either implemented by teachers or professionals, charities who do this. They come to the school and give kids these programs. So there's a lot of different programs, but basically the main aim is to teach children how to recognize, how to identify that something abusive is happening, and then how to resist that or avoid that from happening, and then how to report it, how to disclose what's happened to them. So that's kind of the basis of most programs, teaching children how to do those things. And now it's always been the main method of prevention that we've used. So in recent years, there has been a little bit more focus on perpetrators and potential perpetrators. So trying to work with people who have inappropriate thoughts and feelings. However, that is quite a new thing. And usually perpetrators have been quite neglected in prevention. We do have programs for once an offender has been caught and they've been sent to prison, and then there's, kind of like prisoner programs or kind of programs in prison. But this trying to prevent it before it occurs, that's quite a new thing with perpetrators. So child education has been the main focus since the 1970s. That's the main way we've been trying to prevent sexual abuse up to this point.
Thank you for that, Julia. You see, this is a very important topic, the one that you are working on right now, and it is very important for a variety of reasons. For a number of years, I've been carried out a research here too in northern Italy. Of course, this case looking at the presence of Africans in this part of the world. Of course, looking at African related to immigration. One of the aspects of the conversation is around women abuse, as they call it like that, even children abuse, in that most of these children that are trafficked from Africa to Europe, sometimes they face a lot of abuse along the way, sometimes in Libya before they get to Europe, and even when they get here, they enter into this famous sex trafficking and the rest of it. So it's an argument that is well grounded within our demography, within our community, as it were, whether you are looking at it here in Italy, also in other parts of Europe, or even I don't know of Australia. So what I'm really like driving at here is there a demography that you are focusing on, or do you deal with all kinds of abuses related to women and children?
The program that I'm developing will be used in conjunction with other parenting programs. So it is for parents who might be referred to a parenting program by an outside agency. So maybe it is Child Protection Agency, or maybe it's health or something like that. So the family might be struggling in some ways and they've been referred to a parenting program. Or possibly the parents themselves have referred themselves to a parenting or taken themselves to a parenting program because they feel that they're struggling in that area. And so this program will be added in to existing evidence-based parenting programs. So although it's not specifically targeting a certain group, this program is designed to be added to parenting programs. So parenting programs you might find in the community. So it's not targeted to it's not about women's violence at all. It's just about preventing child sexual abuse within a positive parenting framework.
Tell me something about the perpetrators. Like, why do they do this? What did you find in your research? Okay, I know now, it's a little bit psychological because I'm telling you to enter into the mind of the perpetrator to know why they do the things, no? But of course, this is going to be important because if certain agencies have funded this project, I believe they want a prevention. But by having a prevention, they first of all want to understand why people do certain things, no? So at the end of the day, we cannot avoid it. So make an effort to respond to the question, why did they go around abusing children sexually?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question and a very important question, and a question that is addressed usually more from a criminology angle. And I know that there are some great programs happening, especially in Europe, say in Germany. I think in America, there's some programs now too, where they're targeting, like I was saying before, men with already or people who come to them with inappropriate thoughts and feelings. They're acknowledging they have a problem and they're getting the help that they need. So really, that's the people working in that area. They would have more information about that kind of, like, I wouldn't like to enter into the area of saying that why someone might do that or in what circumstances they might do that. So that comes more from a kind of criminology or forensic psychology area. So I'm more focused on if we're going to avoid sexual abuse from before it happens, before the actual fact, we can't wait for children to have it done to them and then disclose, or have a sexual advance happen to them and then try to resist it. We have to take a step back and prevent it before it ever happens. And to do that, we really have to look at the adults rather than the children in the circumstances. And we have to look at the perpetrators and the protectors. So the perpetrators is not the area that I'm focused on, but like I said, there is some great work happening in that space. So I'm looking at just the protectors. So I'm looking at the people who can actually create an environment where it's less likely to happen. Because even if we do understand how it happens, or it's still, one never can really make a totally safe person. So I'm using a theory called situational crime prevention for my program, which basically entails creating a safe situation, a safe environment, rather than a safe person, because it's quite impossible to know that you have a safe person. So a person might have any kind of security checks or references, or be a great person in the society. However, we can't be sure that that person is ever 100% safe. And we can give our children all the information that we think they need. And we can be quite certain that our child might say no in the situation, but you can never be sure. So we can never create a totally safe child, and we can never create a totally safe adult or know that an adult is safe. And so if we can't create safe people, then the best thing to do is create a safe situation, a safe environment where you could theoretically have an unsafe adult and a child who might not be able to resist or avoid the abuse from happening. However, because we've created a safe situation, a safe environment, then the abuse is unable or less likely to occur.
I find that very important. Anyway, I'm going to come to that safe environment shortly. You concentrate mainly on the children, am I right? Or do you also look at the family in totality? Because, okay, if we need to get to the environment that is beyond just the children, you look at the society itself, look at the institution, look at the family, because those are the ones that are responsible for creating the environment. The children have very little to do there, even though they are participants. So help me understand that. You concentrate only on the children, or how much influence does the family background have in what happened at the end of the day?
Yes, no, I think it does have a big influence, and obviously just the family circumstances, the family situation, the family history, it all has a big influence on what's happening in the family. But in terms of my work, I'm just working with parents or caregivers. It doesn't necessarily have to be the natural parents. We're calling them parents, but it's all caregivers of kids in the family. So we're working specifically with caregivers of children to help them recognize when a situation might need more monitoring, or a situation might need a few more questions asked, or a situation might need to be avoided. Helping parents make decisions about their child's environment and about their child's situation that would make the child safer. So it's true that in some situations it's much more difficult. If you do have a family situation maybe where there is a lot of comings and goings and a lot of adults that have contact with the child, or there's certainly, a single parent who does have to work a lot and spends a lot of time outside the house, outside the family home. Those are all situations that make this more difficult. So it is true that these all affect a parent's ability to create the safe environments that we're talking about. So that's why I think it's important to work with parents too and help them see what's something they can do. They might not be able to do the best thing in this situation, which might be, stay home with the child, or don't let the child look after by this person or this person. But sometimes that's not possible, and it's not realistic to ask parents to do maybe what might be the ultimate best thing to do in this situation. So we work with parents to try to come up with something that they can do, something that's feasible in their life, in their situation. So it might just be a minimal change, but a minimal change that will make the situation slightly more safe for that child. So it's about working with the parents where they're at and trying to help them come up with their own strategies of what would work in their life and in their situation and in their family environment.
Now, for the children, I don't know what is the age range that we are referring to now, because children, of course, okay, it depends. Maybe we are referring, I don't know what is the age. Of course, you are going to clarify that for me. I remember, for example, that was like 2 years ago. There was a conference that I participated here in Verona to sensitize people about sexual violence and trafficking, because it was in relation to the office of UN in Sweden. So we did it here to sensitize the community here. So then, looking at the adult, we try to see also what can be the responsibility even on the part of the victim, no? Because if you're an adult, there is a certain responsibility that you can give to the person who is abusing you, because somehow you do have a little role to play in it. Okay, that might be very big as a statement, or you need to be explained. But as children, okay, that will automatically be taken off now, because a child have no responsibility at all. So tell me, what is the age of the children we are referring to here? So that will help us to understand how much we can really sort of tell them to do, how much responsibility that they might have, and to sort of protect themselves and not be victim of this abuse.
Well, we're dealing with all ages, from very young to even teenagers. So obviously the tactics of monitoring and supervision and parental involvement, they'll be different from a 15-year-old to a 5-year-old. But 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds still need a certain amount of those things. And having a good base from when the child is young will then help the parents to have a good framework, a good parent-child relationship, good parent-child communication. So all that helps when they're teenagers. But certainly parents are still responsible for monitoring and involvement and supervision, even with teenagers. I mean, especially online, you know, the danger is really quite high for teenagers to be involved with in online sexual exploitation. And that does still come down to parents monitoring and having conversations with their children, but really keeping a close eye on what their kids are doing online. So yeah, the answer to your question is all ages, really.
Now, let's go back to what you were saying before about the safe environment or the safe place. Yes, I think this is the responsibility that all of us have. If we are parents, no, we must be able to guarantee a safe environment for our children to grow, because they didn't choose to come to this world. It was our choice to have children. Therefore, it's our responsibility to make sure that they grow well, to give them a safe environment. So tell me about that safe environment. How do we create it? How does it work?
So I think there's 4 big things that are important in a safe environment in terms of sexual abuse prevention. And that's monitoring, supervision, safe delegation of care, and communication. So monitoring would involve things like you monitor your child's relationship, so you know who their friends are, who the parents of their friends are. You make sure that you know where your child, which friend they're with, and you monitor their interactions. So you monitor especially any interactions with adults or older children, extended interactions that involve one-to-one time. You monitor their online behavior. You know who they're chatting to online. You know what they're doing online. You don't have your child have devices in their bedrooms, definitely not in their bedrooms overnight. You talk to your child about safe internet use. You make your child aware that there are people who say they're 13, but they're not really 13. You monitor, you always know where your child is and who they're with. So for sexual abuse to occur, it has to involve one-to-one time with a perpetrator. There is no other way that it can happen. And so sometimes that time is only quite short, but it does involve one-to-one time alone. So that's what we need to be careful of. So parents always need to make sure they're monitoring or checking in with their child about one-to-one time with adults or older children. And so that's the next step was supervision. So again, making sure that you're supervising your child, you know where your child is and who they're with. There's sexual abuse by strangers, that danger is quite low. It's normally known people. However, obviously, when you're out and about, you do supervise your child, especially around, public change rooms or bathrooms and swimming pools and that kind of thing. So it also involves supervision when the child is out. So delegation of care is important because we know from research, we know that there are some higher risk times, such as bedtimes, bath times, those kind of intimate care duties. So it's important to limit other people doing those. Like you don't delegate that care to someone who's not a biological parent, or you really try to limit that. You make sure that there are certain high risk groups, such as adolescent babysitters are quite a high risk group. And so, you would be encouraging parents to think about using other types of babysitters other than, say, a teenager who might be offering to babysit for free. And then communication. I mean, it's important to talk to children, always have open discussions about everything, about their relationships and their friendships and time alone that they have with people, to check in with them. So I would say that the checking in with the child is the very minimum. Like I was saying before, sometimes it's really difficult to do all these things. It's difficult, especially if you're trying to work and you really need someone to care for your child. And there's all kinds of issues that mean that some of these steps are really hard to take. But the very minimum that needs to be done really is checking in with children. So always, if they have been somewhere, or they've been with a babysitter, or they've been somewhere where you wouldn't ideally like them to be or have left them, but you would then do checking in. So always checking in with the child about the interaction they've had or where they've been. So saying, what happened in that time, and, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? Was there anything that worried you? So always talking to the child about any activities they do, and always checking in about their online behavior as well. So these are just some of the techniques, some of the tools that we teach parents, and we give them scenarios and kind of help them work through how would you in this situation be able to just make the environment a little bit safer. So that's our main aim, just working with parents to try to just make little changes that would make that situation a bit safer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now looking at maybe the second part of the second phase, as it were, of your project, which is the parent interaction. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you approach it?
Yeah, so just always, I think as parents, sometimes we don't tend to actively listen, or we don't tend to ask open-ended questions. So I would say, setting aside a time where you do just listen, and you don't have your phone, and you're not on another device, you're not working, but you're just spending time with the child or the teenager and listening. I think some people feel that can be a little bit intense, especially some adolescents, and I think especially boys feel this way, that sometimes it can be a bit intense to actually just say, oh, we're going to sit down now and have an intense chat. So that can be a bit too much pressure and a bit too intense. So it can be just in that when you're driving somewhere or walking somewhere, so you're not actually kind of sitting looking at each other, but you're facing the same way, and just asking them about their feelings, asking them about their lives, their friends, their interactions. And so it's just always having that, and that strong, if that starts early, that strong foundation can then help the child disclose things to you if they do have issues of concern, or if something is bothering them. It just has a relationship where the child is able to come to the parents if there's any problems, or tell the parent if they do have concerns about an interaction that they're having with an adult or an older person.
All right, communication, it might appear very simple, but I don't think it is. It is sometimes deep, no? We don't understand it enough, on the average, no? But if you are trained now, then you're able to decode a certain thing when somebody is talking to you. So in this respect, since we now need the parent to be able to monitor their children, their conversation, because you are not there with their friends, no, you are not there with the person that they are talking to, and now your child is going to tell you something that help you understand who is the person that he or she has talked to, or how did the person make him or her feel. And now, for you to be able to understand that, you need a little bit of understanding, even yourself. Sometimes some parents are not well equipped to understand this perfectly. Or maybe I'm wrong. So help me understand it.
Yeah.
Is there a need that maybe some parent might need to understand how to decode some of this information that their children might be feeding them?
It's true. I mean, I think adults have a hard time understanding other adults sometimes, in our relationships and all our relationships, adults or with children. Sometimes it's hard to decode what the other person is saying and actually understand what they're saying and actively listen. So it is tough, which is why part of this program is actually being embedded into a parenting program, where parenting programs usually they do work on that side of things, like helping parents communicate with their children, helping parents to listen, and as you're saying, kind of like decode what the child is actually needing in this, because a lot of times kids don't communicate with words, they communicate with actions. And so helping parents to understand what the child is doing, what their behavior is actually trying to tell you, is also important. And that's why the benefit of this program is being in a wider parenting program that teaches parents these kinds of things. Because I think it is tough, children aren't born with an instruction manual, and it's tough. And sometimes we do need a little bit of help to learn that stuff.
A certain maturity is required on the part of the parents. If you look at the traditional system of raising the family, you understand that a high sense of value was required for you to build a family. In my place, for example, in my culture, sometimes the parent have to do a lot of investigation before you could get married. They want to know the family genealogy, where you are going into, what is their history, where are they coming from, are there history of theft in that family, are they responsible, are they good people, are they bad people, are they liar, are they cheat, do wife stays there, do husband treat their wife very well. All this investigation, you that is in love as a young adult, you don't have the time to be able to understand that you are in love, which is like a fume, like a kind of, you don't understand it perfectly because you think you are in love. But for your parents, they go and do this background check before they say, okay, yes, you can go ahead to do that. All this is part of preparing you to become a successful parent. Now, I say that to put in context a kind of reality that we are having here, say, among the community that we are concentrating on, which is the African diaspora, or the immigrant community, as it were, in that these people have been detached from home. They are not living with their parents. They don't have this opportunity to be able to undergo this background checking of who they are going into as partner. And this means that there are some certain things that are lacking there. And coupled with the fact that sometimes they are not mature enough to really parent their children. And when this happens, they lack this possibility of this monitoring that we are talking about.
Family separation, for whatever reason, whether it's distance, physical distance, or just other things that have happened to cause family breakdown and family detachment. I mean, that's a problem, I think, that exacerbates everything that we've been talking about and makes everything so much harder. I mean, we know parenting is hard anyway, especially if you are struggling, say, in other areas, struggling financially and struggling with housing and struggling with on all fronts. And then you also have no family to fall back on. I mean, that just makes it, just adds another layer of distress and stress to the family. So it definitely has an impact. And I think it's not just people coming from other place that haven't been, like you're saying, kind of groomed into parenting. I think the way we live now, it's happening in most places. We're very mobile, we leave home, we go further afield, and we do it all on our own without our parents or aunts, uncles around us. So I think that is a problem for lots of people, that they don't have that family background and don't, to help them, don't have that family there, and haven't actually been like you say, kind of inducted into parenting with family being there just due to family breakdown and things like that. So it definitely adds to this particular problem and to struggling with parenting.
Now, I want to understand, what is your strategy of collecting your data? I mean, your research. This is a research project, right?
Yes.
So tell us about your strategy of collating the data that you analyze at the end of the day.
Okay, so my research has basically involved working out, because parents have been really not been involved in sexual abuse prevention at all. And when they have been involved, their role has been limited to educator. So parents have been asked to educate their children about these things in the same way that school programs educate children. So using parents in this way really doesn't harness the protective potential that they could enforce on their child's environment. And using parents in this way basically is liable to the same criticisms as using school-based programs, because we don't have much evidence that these school programs are working, and we don't have any evidence that parental education is working. So my research I've asked parents what it is that they've told their kids, because if we're going to educate children on this, parents have to be very specific in what they tell kids. Kids like to work in black and white. They're not very good with ambiguity. They're not very good with gray. And so to protect a child with education, you would have to give the child quite specific information about what might happen. So specific information that someone may try to say, touch them on their genitals, or, you'd need to give them specific examples of behaviors so that they know what to look out for. You also have to tell children who would do these things, because if you are telling the child that someone might hurt them or do something wrong to them, most children would probably suspect that it's someone very scary in the park, or someone removed from their family. And so to educate children appropriately, you would also have to tell them who the perpetrator might be. So you have to tell them it could be their family member. It could be someone they like and know, someone that mum and dad like and know. So I found in my research that although parents are really supportive of this idea, they're supportive of education. And if you ask them, parents I've spoken to, 95% have said, yes, I want to be my child's educator. However, in that same sample of parents, 95% said, yes, I want to be my child's educator. Only 52 said that they'd actually told their child specific information, that someone might try to touch their genitals. And only 35% said this could be someone, a family member. So that leaves a lot of children without the correct information. So what I've really found in my research is that parents have so many discrepancies about this. They really want to do it, but they just can't. They're very good at talking to their kids about strangers and about abduction and about body integrity, body ownership. Parents are okay with telling their kids, your body belongs to you. You have private parts, don't let anyone touch your private parts. General topics like that, parents are really good at talking to their kids about. But actually, the concrete examples that kids need for sexual abuse prevention is just not being given to kids. So that was the sample that I talked to for this. They were parents from Australia and the UK who were very highly educated sample and knew a lot about sexual abuse. They scored highly on a knowledge test. So it wasn't lack of knowledge that was making them not give the children this information. And then we also did the same study, repeated it with parents who are struggling, parents who have been referred to parenting programs by Child Safety. And we found even less of those parents were willing to talk. So only 2% had given their children information about family members and known others. So my research just shows that parents are really struggling with this. And this really highlights, this research we have evidence from 40 years ago to suggest that parents were struggling in the same way to tell their kids this. So the research we have suggests that parents would like to do this, but find it really tough. And on the whole, don't do it, are not able to do it. And that's possibly because they feel they don't want to break their child's trusting in others. They don't want to cause any harms or fear. So the parents, I spoke to, I did a qualitative study. So I interviewed 24 parents here on the Gold Coast, and out of those parents, over 80% had concerns about the harms that might come from giving their child specific information. So my research is really kind of building a bit of a story about parents really want to do this, but they struggle to do this. They have concerns about doing it. And that even education or knowing what the dangers are doesn't help parents do this. And that despite parents knowing that the dangers come from familiar adults, they always revert back to focusing on strangers and abduction in their warnings to their children. And then I also did a study last year here at Griffith from the other point of view. So I talked to young adults, I talked to students here or surveyed students here who I asked them about the education that they'd received in their past. And I asked them what their parents told them. And they remembered the same thing. I think 97% said, my parents talked to me about strangers and abduction, and a much lower percent, I think it was 19%, said, my parents gave me specific information. So when you're looking at the offspring, they're saying the same thing that the parents are saying. And interestingly, we just don't have the evidence to suggest that knowledge is helping children in this area, that knowing about sexual abuse is helping them prevent sexual abuse. And we know this from other areas of research, say health particularly. We all know that we shouldn't smoke, or we shouldn't eat certain things, or we shouldn't, there's a lot of health behaviors that we know we should do, and yet we don't. Or other areas involving interpersonal, say in a domestically violent situation. Victims in that situation usually know that what's happening is not right, know they shouldn't stay, but find it very difficult to extract themselves, because you're not just talking about them. The behavior is not just easy for them to enact. They're thinking about a whole social, they're thinking about a whole lot of interactions there and a whole lot of relationships. And it's the same for knowing about this. So just because a child has all the knowledge, just because a child knows what sexual abuse is and who might be the perpetrators and what they need to do if they find themselves in this situation, that does not mean that when they're in a situation, in a very close relationship with an adult who has groomed them and has groomed the family and is a person of standing in the society, or a person of authority, or a person their family likes, for them to avoid, resist, disclose in that circumstance is really, really difficult. And I think we all know as adults that sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we think, I should say something here, I should not let this happen. And it's hard. It's hard. And it's particularly tough for kids when it's an adult that is attempting to do this with them, because adults who act in this way with kids are very good at what they do, good at getting this relationship with the child and slowly desensitizing them. And so there is not much evidence to suggest that the knowledge that children gain from education is actually helping them prevent abuse. So the study that I did with Griffith University students last year, we actually looked at that. We asked them, did they receive education at school and from their parents? And then were they sexually abused? And we found no relationship between education and instance of abuse. And other studies have found that as well. So I think in that, with all the information that's amassing in this area, we really need to start thinking about other ways to prevent sexual abuse, other than relying children to protect themselves. Because, that's something we've moved away from, obviously, with rape and with sexual harassment and sexual assault of adults. We no longer rely on victims to protect themselves. We're doing other things. We're doing other things to try to prevent sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I think it's time we did that with sexual abuse as well.
All right, thank you for that. That is really a thorough and a deep research that you are into, and you need to continue because it is very important, the conversation, especially in helping to underline the gray line, the line that is not very clearly defined. No? Okay,
Yes.
now when you say that we should look for alternative way of how to prevent the abuse, what do you mean exactly? What is your suggestion?
Well, that's the suggestion that is this new program that I'm developing. So rather than involving parents as educators, so there are lots of programs that are targeted at parents in this area, but teaching them how to teach their children about sexual abuse. And that's what I'm saying is not really the best way to use them. Using parents as educators is just liable to the same criticisms as school programs. So we really need to involve parents by helping parents to create safer environments using that situational crime prevention theory that I mentioned. So really working with parents to create safer environments where sexual abuse is less likely to occur. We can never erase it. We can never put a bubble around a child. We can never make sure that the child is always in a safe situation. But we can tweak things in the environment to make the child safer, to make the environment, the situation just a bit safer. Hopefully a lot safer, but sometimes just making little changes can make a difference. And the other way is child well-being. So we know that offenders target children who are emotionally needy, who they can then provide things the child might be missing out on, say affection, attention, involvement, listening, all those things. So the other side of it is helping parents to engage with their children on that level, trying to bolster their child's well-being so that they are less likely to be targeted in that way. So they're less likely to be lured by those temptations of love and affection. So I think parents can be protective with those two pathways.
Now, looking at your research, is there any particular case study that you can, okay, I'm not saying reveal me the name or the identity of an individual. Is there any particular case study that sort of remain in your head because of because of how the case go, because of, I don't know, that you can share with us to sort of help to educate more people?
That's interesting. So none of my research has actually involved victims or survivors. So my research has all been with parents or with, like I was saying, with offspring. So with older, with adults, asking them about their history with their parents. So I don't have any direct examples of victims or survivors in terms of a case study. But I mean, reading other people's work has really highlighted, when victims or survivors talk about their experiences, has really highlighted to me the difficulty that they have in recognizing, resisting, and reporting this. So in terms of them being able to recognize that this is sexually abusive and I must do something, grooming is so effective that the child may actually feel love for the person, or they might feel a connection to the person, or their parents are saying, hey, he's such a great person, or she's such a great person, this is what they're doing. So it's difficult for kids to then recognize that as something bad. So I think kids do really struggle with that recognition, especially with the subtlety of, the initial sexual advances, because arguably even adults sometimes have difficulties in distinguishing what might be inappropriate or appropriate. So, and that goes as well to actually resist, asking children to resist in the instance of a sexual advance or sexual victimization. Again, the grooming process is such that at that point, it's very difficult for the child to resist. And also, if the child has been possibly somehow colluding with the perpetrator, so the perpetrator might say, get the child to do something that might be against their parents' wishes, say drink a little bit of alcohol or watch a movie they're not supposed to watch or something like that. And then the perpetrator has that against the child, or can hold that over the child, can manipulate the child with those kinds of things. So again, asking a child to resist or to put a stop to something, that's very difficult. They're in a very tough situation there. Closure as well, reading victims, survivors, stories of their disclosure and the agonizing decisions they've had to make. I do remember one child, I think she was 15, and her main thoughts were, if I disclose this, my cousins lose their dad. And that's a big weight. That's a big weight for a young person to have on their shoulders, that if they disclose, some person loses their father or their mother, or relationships break down. And so that was a long answer to your question, but basically I think my reading of survivor and victim's testimony has really highlighted to me how difficult it is to recognize, resist, and report these things, just as it would be for we know it is for adults who have been who've had experiences of sexual assault. Or that's the kind of long answer to your question.
It's okay. That's perfect. All right. Now, I don't remember asking this question before. If I had, then I've forgotten it. What exactly is the problem that you're trying to resolve with this research?
My research project is about really amassing enough information, enough evidence to highlight to people that there are things we can do, that there are better ways than relying on victim behavior change, that we've done this for a long time. It's very entrenched. We think it's the only way forward, or we've been using it for so long that we kind of stopped wondering if it was actually working or not. And I'm hoping that my research will make people think that there is a different way, and that maybe the way that we've been doing things has not been the best way to do things. So that would be my summary of my research, that I'm trying to amass evidence to suggest that there are better ways to involve parents, and there are ways that we can change adult behavior rather than child behavior in this area, because victim behavior change, in this case child behavior change, is not expected in any other area of victimization or abuse, not with physical abuse or bullying or sexual assault or rape. We don't ever expect the victim to defend themselves, rather than focusing on why is this happening and how can we stop it from happening. So that would be my hope.
Say maybe a parent or an organization out there want to connect with you because of what you do. They want to, I don't know, hire you or whatever. I know you are not all for hiring just now, but okay, we are all there to do render service, no?
Yep.
Okay, so how can people connect with you?
I would love to talk to anyone who would like to talk to me about this. I do love discussing my research and how we can advance the field further. And I'm available on LinkedIn. People can find me on LinkedIn, or at Griffith University on the Gold Coast. I'm on the website there, quite easy to find. And I'm post-doctoral researcher there, so I can be found at Griffith or on LinkedIn.
All right. Now, dear Julia, this is very important. What kind of a message would you like to leave for the parents and guardian in this case, because their role is very important in the protection, the prevention, and of course also the protection of their children from abuse. What is your message to them?
I think my message is I don't want to parents to feel panicked about this, and I don't want parents to feel like they can never allow their children freedom or allow their children to see people, that it's a really fine line between being overprotective and being protective, but that if parents can just have it in the back of their mind that one-to-one interactions with their child and other people should have a little bit of monitoring built into them. So whether it's not, it's just thinking about, okay, who's that person and what's the relationship here? And is there any way that I can, monitor this by perhaps dropping in unannounced or having another person be there, even if it's a sibling, another child, someone else to drop in unannounced. So just to kind of think about those one-on-one interactions, because that's how sexual abuse occurs. It can only really occur. It thrives on privacy, and perpetrators exploit a lack of supervision and monitoring. That's exactly what they do. And then they kind of, isolate and spend more and more one-on-one time with the child. They create situations where they're alone with the child. So I would just say if parents could just have a little question mark in the back of their mind about those interactions and just monitor when they think that there is, somebody's orchestrating time alone with their child. So that's probably, in summary, that's probably the main thing that I would say. There's obviously lots of other things that I mentioned before, but I would say keeping a little question mark about one-on-one time, and making sure that that's as safe as you can make it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very valid advice. So I'm even as a parent too, I'm keeping that as an important at the back of my mind. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It has really been very encouraging and very rich, the conversation. To conclude it, is there anything else you wanted to say? Maybe I didn't ask you, because it's not possible to enter into your head and know everything you can say. This is the last statement from you. If there's anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask you, or just to conclude it, please go ahead and do that.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, no, I think your questions have covered pretty much everything. I think I've really been able to get across my ideas and my research. So I really thank you for the opportunity to do that. And I do hope that we can have more of a dialogue about the best way to prevent this problem, and possibly have a rethink of how things have been done previously, and maybe have a shift in what we're doing. So I really thank you for the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you so much, Julia. It'll be a pleasure on my path. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewanfo. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.